Hello there, welcome to another unlockyoursound.com tutorial with myself, Chris Carvalho. The goal of this tutorial is to show you the different automation modes in Logic Pro 10, including trim and relative, which might actually be the reason you're watching this tutorial. If you're not familiar with the automation modes anyway, then great, I'll cover them in this tutorial, but if you are trying to find out about trim and relative as well, which came to us in 10.1, then I'll explain that in the sort of second half of this tutorial. So let's just get started. Now I've got a chord here, so I'm just going to play that. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open automation, and just by pressing A on my keyboard, and then I'm just going to make some nodes. And I'm just going to do this. So obviously this is just, me editing automation, point and click automation using my mouse. And at this point it's set to read, meaning it's just reading the automation that's there. And anything that I do with the fader won't make an adjustment to the automation. So for example, if I just leave that on read, press play, even if I grab the fader, like now, for example, if I just grab that down, it springs back up. Because it's in read mode, it just reads the value that is at the position of the playhead. So at this point, it's 0. So you can see there, the fader is just moving with the automation. So that's read, simple as that. Next, we have touch. Okay, so what touch does is if I touch the fader, if I move the fader during playback, it will replace the automation data at that time with the new data that I'm, using, the new values that I'm using. So just to give you an example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create like a sort of dip here using touch. So basically with touch on, I'm going to press play, grab the fader, and just drop it there. But I'm going to grab it just before that point there. So watch this. Okay, wasn't great, but that's what it did. I let go at this point, and it then continued to read the automation data that was already there. That's how touch actually differs to latch. So if I undo that and switch to latch, and do the same thing, or try to do exactly the same thing. Now, notice the difference here. I let go of the fader about here, okay, but because it was on latch, it latched onto the value that I sort of let go at, and continued to replace the rest of the automation data during playback. So basically, the playhead was, replacing all of the data there with the value that I last latched onto. So again, if I did touch and did the same thing, let go, it still read the data that was already there after I let go of the fader. And Latch doesn't do that. It just latches onto the last value and just replaces the data after that with that same value. And then we have write. So let's say, okay, cool. So it's giving us this warning. Write mode erases multiple parameters in one go without touching anything. In most cases, it's better to use latch or touch. I agree. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the playhead here. And let's say that after this bit, everything after this, I want to write to 0. Obviously I could pencil it in, but what I could actually do, what is actually easier, is I could just bring the fader all the way down and then just press play, and it just writes that value after that. Obviously I stopped there, so the rest of the data was still there, but you see how it's just quite destructive. Logic switches back to the last mode that I used, so that I think that's to prevent me not writing from then on and accidentally deleting a lot of automation data, which is I'm pretty happy about, but I could be wrong. So that's read, touch, latch, and write. Now we have subsets of those. We have trim and relative. Okay, so I'm going to stay in touch mode because it's kind of the one that I prefer, and we know what touch and the ways that touch and latch differ. So let's say I did the same as I did before. Okay, but maybe I feel that I didn't quite go low enough there. Okay, so instead of doing it again, I can use trim to basically just push those values a bit further down. So it doesn't replace them, it just pushes them down if I push the fader down. So for example, I'm just going to push down a bit more. You see how it just kind of like, the values were sort of like here, but it just pushed them down by the amount that I asked it to push it down by, as opposed to just writing over the data again. So I'll do that one more time just so that I can get a bit further down. Yeah. See, now it's pushed them all the way down to the bottom. So it didn't replace them, it just kept pushing them down by the amount that I was pushing them down at. So if it was like, for example, at -40 or -20, sorry, and I did -5, I was pushing the fader down -5 at that point, it just went to -25 basically. So it trims the values that are already there. I hope that explains that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo that. Maybe just a sort of couple of times until we're back here, and then I'm going to choose relative this time. So we're still in touch mode, but instead of using trim, we're gonna use relative, which might be the one you end up using most. I don't know. It really is a personal thing. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a dip here, just like I was before, but using relative this time, and we'll see what the difference is. Cool. So you see here now that we have effectively got two lanes. We have the original lane, and we have this new, and you can see it in the sort of background there, it's still there. And now we have this new relative lane. So just in your head, just think of those two added up together. Okay, so because this is at 0, everything that happens at that back line there is still happening. So because 0 is unity gain, means no adjustment. But then what happens here is adjusted by this amount here. Okay, so that's how that works. And you can hear it. They're working together. And that relative touch basically gives you another lane in which to work in. If I opened up the enclosure triangle here, actually, I get the original volume automation lane that I did, and also this relative lane. So it gives me a bit more flexibility. So that's basically the difference. You know, with trim, it would have just trimmed the values that were already there, which is useful. But you might find yourself using this one a bit more, especially if you've got one that is penciled in automation and another one that is sort of touch automation that you might have used a MIDI controller for, or you might have grabbed the fader using mouse like I did. Obviously that's not perfect, but if you have a controller, you know, that would probably be better. So I hope that explains it. This is not easy to explain, and I'm sorry if it didn't sink in the first time, but please guys, feel free to ask me questions. I will answer them to the best of my ability, just to give you a bit of light on those. I can't tell you exactly when you'll use what and why. Just know that they're there and you might find uses for them, but feel free to ask at the same time. So I hope that was useful. If you like this video, please like and subscribe if you feel that this is of value to you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.